The FTX collapse is rippling through the crypto world. Crypto firm BlockFi is the latest company to file for bankruptcy. It listed an outstanding $275 million loan to FTX, which is likely not going to get paid back anytime soon. And the New York Times now reporting some of FTX's cash, when they had it, funded a massive political operation to try to win over both regulators and politicians in hopes of influencing regulation in the crypto world. One of the authors of that very story, New York Times political reporter Ken Vogel, joins us now, along with CNBC senior analyst Ron Insana. Ken, tell us more about how FTX went about wooing these lawmakers and regulators, and they swallowed it up, hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah, Steph, I've been covering influence operations in Washington for a long time, and I've never seen one go from 0 to 60 or maybe 100 quite so quickly and spread so much money around through Washington think tanks and advocacy groups and direct contributions from executives to campaigns, super PAC spending. They did it all. They bought a townhouse on Capitol Hill for $3.3 million where they held all sorts of receptions, including some as recently as the week before the election. And they found quite a willing audience among Washington policymakers, both on the Hill, members of Congress who were the beneficiaries of super PAC spending, who were writing letters to the SEC, urging them not to investigate, not to proceed with what appears to have been a preliminary fact-finding investigation into FTX, getting meetings with the CFTC. They hired, in fact, the former CFTC general counsel as their head lobbyist. And now what you see is a lot of folks who are running away, a lot of folks who were quite eager to be the beneficiaries of this largesse, who are returning the funds or trying to distance themselves from this operation. It is certainly questions being raised about where this money came from that they sloshed around Washington.
I want you to back this up for us. So this company that went from being worth 0 to $32 billion, that was domiciled in the Bahamas, far away from the watchful U.S. government's eye. This company came to Washington and they convinced lawmakers to write a letter to the SEC to say, please stop looking at this company. What lawmakers signed that letter?
Well, there were 8 on the House Financial Services Committee. And to be clear, it's not, a lot of the crypto lobbying, there are a number of firms involved, and FTX was certainly one of them. And some of these 8 lawmakers who wrote this letter, even as it's unclear if it was at the behest of FTX directly or a coalition of these groups, but some of these lawmakers were beneficiaries of a lot of spending by the super PACs that were funded by FTX executives, including Representative Ted Budd of North Carolina, who is now Senator-elect Ted Budd. He was the beneficiary of hundreds of thousands of dollars of spending by this FTX co-chief executive Ryan Salame, I think is how you say his last name. I emailed Representative Budd's office. They didn't respond to my request for comment.
Were they successful in this letter? Did they get the SEC to stop?
It's not clear. I mean, we don't know what the SEC ultimately was going to do. They certainly preferred, and they actually indicated in a questionnaire that they sent around to candidates that the super PAC that was funded by some of these FTX executives sent around to candidates, sort of intimating that they would prefer that this regulation take place outside of the SEC's purview. They preferred the CFTC. They thought that was friendlier terrain for them. So it's unclear. A lot of this stuff is up in the air. That's why that there are so many questions about the regulation of cryptocurrency generally. Who is actually going to take the reins and be the regulator here? What
a humiliation, Ron. Lawmakers saying, let's move this from the SEC to the baby version, the CFTC. How on earth does this happen? Okay, it's no surprise that every big company, every wealthy person wants to try to get influence in Washington. But do all of these lawmakers not have complete egg on their face right now? This happened right under their nose. Nobody smelled a rat.
Well, they may have, Stephanie, as you said. I mean, they conveniently tried to move it to the regulator, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, which has a lighter touch when it comes to new financial instruments, if we can go so far as to call cryptocurrencies those. I still think, as Gertrude Stein once said, there's no there there. But there is a great deal of movement afoot to try to create some regulations for consumer protection around these cryptocurrencies markets, which may or may not be necessary in the long run. I mean, there's so much damage already done that has not just put egg on the face of regulators and legislators, but also on the industry itself. And there's a real loss of confidence. You mentioned BlockFi, FTX, Genesis. There are a whole host of crypto lenders and exchanges that have gone under now in a relatively short, in fact, an extraordinarily short period of time, that we'll see where we go with regulation. Look, in a perfect world, in my estimation, having covered this stuff for 38 years, I don't think cryptocurrencies have a place in the financial architecture of our world, but there still needs to be some safeguards put around it. We'll see who ends up with it. There are big questions, jurisdictional questions around whether any of these things are securities, which would fall under the SEC, or whether they're something else, in which case they'd fall under the Commodity Futures Trading Commission.
Then, Ron, if there's no real regulation here, at the end of this, is the founder of FTX just going to end up broke but not in trouble because there weren't any laws technically broken? Because it sure seems like it was massive fraud.
Well, the fraud's a different issue. Regulation around how cryptocurrencies are overseen is one thing. If you have a backdoor through which you can move money without your auditors and even some of your executives knowing that, you're using it for personal expenditures, you're moving customer money into a hedge fund so you can speculate with borrowed money in addition to that, and have those trades go bad, yeah, that's fraud, that's misappropriation of funds. Those activities do have rules around them, and you can be prosecuted for those transgressions.
Enron on steroids. Ken Vogel, Ron Insana, thank you.
Exactly.
And any of those lawmakers who wrote that letter to the SEC, if they would like to join us on the 11th hour, we've got questions.